Okay, hi everyone. I hope you're having a good day. It's nice to see you all here to join the presentation. So just a quick introduction. My name's Katie Friend, and I'm International Officer of the recruitment team within the University of Birmingham. So our presentation today, we're going to talk about a personal statement. So some of you might know what that is, or you may just be completely new to this. So it's something that you will write for your application when you come to a UK university. So not just at University of Birmingham, but any UK university that you're applying to, you will write something called a personal statement. So I'm going to give you a lot of information about that, and there's lots of resources as well, which I will also highlight that you can use later on when you're ready to write this. So you don't have to think too much about these kind of numbers and figures here, but there's just some figures here and they relate to personal statements and UCAS applications. And I'm going to go through some of these as we go through the presentation. So firstly, the number 5. So this is the maximum number of course choices or university choices that you can have at a UK university. So a UCAS application, and so you know, UCAS stands for the University and Colleges Admission Service within the UK. And a UCAS application will cost you £26, so UK pounds, to apply to 5 universities. You will have the same personal statement for all of those universities. So different to some other universities overseas, you don't write an individual statement to each individual university. You'll have the same personal statement for all of them. The personal statement also needs to reflect your interest in the course. So not just talking about yourself and your kind of extracurriculars, but talking about why you're interested in studying that particular course as well. We're also, because you write to all universities, it's good to not put in preference for one particular university. As much as I'd like to see, I'm really interested in studying at the University of Birmingham, obviously somewhere like the University of Southampton that's also on this session, they wouldn't want to see that in the presentation. So you need to think about how you want to present yourself. So don't express preference for one specific university. If any of you are thinking about applying to prestigious universities like Oxford or Cambridge, you cannot apply to both of those. You have to choose one or the other. So if any of you are thinking about that, you've got that decision to make, which one you want to apply to. If any of you here are thinking about applying to courses like medicine, dentistry, or veterinary science, it's slightly different because you will have 4 choices for those courses, and then you have a backup choice. So that can be something different. It could be something slightly related, so another science-based course, maybe biomedical or biosciences, or it can be something completely different as well. So if you did want to put law or business, you can do that as well. So it's very much a backup choice. So that is slightly different application with that one. So this is some examples of the UCAS application process and how you can structure your application. So for example, there's 5 universities listed here, and these are courses that you might apply for. So as I mentioned, there's only one personal statement. So it's good to keep the courses that you're applying for very similar, either exactly the same or very, very similar. So you can also touch on a little bit of those areas via your personal statement. So this is okay, but we'd strongly advise against a UCAS form, a UCAS application that looks like this, because as I mentioned before, it's only one personal statement. So it's going to be very, very difficult for you to write a personal statement where you touch on all of these areas. The personal statement's quite short. We'll talk about the length in a little bit. So you're not going to be able to cover all of these different areas during that application process. Also, a lot of you might not know a huge amount about UK universities, but for example, in Birmingham, we actually have 5 universities. Most of them have got Birmingham in the name. So we've got University of Birmingham, Birmingham City University, University College Birmingham. We also have Aston in Birmingham as well. So make sure you get the right one. It's not too difficult. We do have a UCAS code, so each university has a code as well as the name, but just make sure you get the right one. And it's the same for places like Newcastle, Manchester, Nottingham, Sheffield. They will all have more than one university, so make sure you put the right one on your UCAS form. So some more numbers here. The personal statement, as I mentioned, is pretty short. It can be no longer than 47 lines or 4,000 characters, whichever comes first. So pretty short. And we always say make full use of the space. So, you know, make sure you do fill that up because it's important to kind of try and get as much as you can over in that short personal statement, because that's really the main thing that we're going to look at to decide to make you an offer or perhaps to invite you to interview. Also, make sure you use correct punctuation. That's something that especially if you're applying for a course like English literature or something like that, it's really important to have that correct. It's something that the admissions tutors will spend a little bit of time looking at. Avoid repetition. It can be difficult. Sometimes there's something that you've done that you're really, really proud of, and you might want to talk about it a little bit more frequently, but make sure you do not avoid repetition, as it's quite short, you want to fit in as much as you can. Also have a clear logical structure, obviously an introduction, a little bit why you might be interested in the course, moving on to extracurricular activities, and also a conclusion as well. So make sure that structure is clear. Even though it's a short document, we want to have it constructed in a good way. It's still an academic document that will be read by academic staff within our universities. We're also looking for a good command of English. Obviously, for you guys, a lot of you, English will be your first language, so it's not too much of an issue. But just make sure that comes across within the personal statement as well. So it's another way that we can look at your kind of English language skills, as well as looking at your interests and your reasons for studying the course. It's also good to avoid jargon or slang. So slang words, we tend to say to avoid those, and also abbreviations as well. This is, as I mentioned before, an academic document, so we don't want any of that included within this personal statement. And so what are admissions tutors looking for? So we want you to apply in time. I won't touch too much on this because we're looking mainly at personal statement today, but there are specific deadlines that you need to adhere to as well within the UCAS system. As I talked about medicine dentistry before, they have a very early deadline, which is actually just passed for this year. So it's 15th of October each year. So that's the same every year. And then for pretty much all other courses is a deadline in January. So 15th of January. Some universities will accept applications all the way up until June in the year that you're applying. But popular courses do tend to fill up early. And obviously as well, admissions tutors, they get so many applications. So they want to know that you are definitely interested in the course. So you've took your time to make sure you've got the application in advance, so you can show your interest in that way as well. We also have a reference. This is obviously something that's not written by you. This will be written by your teachers at your school, or if you're at a university, they'll be written by maybe one of your professors. And so this is another option for us to find out a little bit more about you and how you are within an academic environment within your school or university. We also look at whether you meet the entry requirement. So we're looking at your predicted grades. Admissions tutors are very familiar with a range of international qualifications. So obviously, even though we're in the UK, we have lots of applications from overseas, particularly in Canada as well. So don't worry too much about qualifications. We will consider a wide range, whether you're doing local Canadian system or if you're doing another international qualification, we're likely to be able to accept that. But entry requirements is something that we would look at to gauge, whether you're going to be able to meet our requirements when you come onto the programme. We're also looking to see whether you're able to cope with the academic demands of the course. And again, this is something that will come across perhaps in your personal statement. Obviously, it will also come from your predicted grades and the reference, but we're also looking for that as well. So a good understanding of what the course entails. Some of you might be coming to study something that you've never studied before. Some students come and take engineering, and they may have studied maths and physics before, but they haven't necessarily studied engineering. So we want to see that you've got a good understanding of what you're actually going to be taking as a degree. And do you have genuine interest and enthusiasm? Admissions tutors, this is their life. This is their specialism. So this is the area they're teaching, they're working in. So when they have someone that applies for that subject area, they want to see that interest is matched. They're going to be teaching you. They want a student that's coming that's got that same enthusiasm for the subject that they have themselves. So one of the reasons that we give to unsuccessful applicants, is that you have not expressed a strong enough interest in the subject area in your personal statement. And this is something that comes across quite a lot. And it is a reason why we have rejected applicants in the past, because they just haven't shown enough interest. And as I was talking about engineering before, that is something that is another reason. If they don't really know what the subject area is, they've just decided they want to apply to engineering or even something like business as well. Sometimes students haven't studied that before, and they might think they know what it's about, but they haven't done enough research. So do spend a bit of time researching the subject area that you're coming into, and make sure that you're showing interest in that subject area. And especially, if you're coming to an interview as well, not many courses do, but some competitive courses do have an interview. And again, that's another opportunity for you to share your interest with us as part of the course. So why is the personal statement important? Well, it's an opportunity for you to provide evidence of the skills that are needed for the course, prove interest in the subject, demonstrate your commitment, and also to stand out from the crowd. Some of our courses have thousands of applications, so we're processing those applications every day. Our admissions teams are just overrun with applications for some courses. Pretty much all of our courses are very popular. So we're looking for you to stand out. What is it you've got that makes you different to that next applicant that we're reading? Admissions tutors may read 20 to 30 personal statements sometimes in a day. So they need to make sure that your kind of interest is capturing their interest. And they will then think about inviting you for an interview, or maybe even just making you a straight offer for the course as well. So just a quick checklist of all the different things. I'm just going to put all of these up here so we can talk about them in a bit more detail. Obviously your current studies. This is something that you might want to talk about or put on your application form. I don't know whether any of you are at any international schools that do A levels, but there's something called the EPQ, which probably not many of you are, but that's something you can talk about as well. Talk about your academic interests. You can talk about reading, books you've read that you enjoy. That can be both fiction or non-fiction relating to the course. If any of you've been into any guest lectures or maybe watched lectures online, especially at the moment, it's so more difficult to get out to things, but if you've watched lectures online, you might want to talk about that. Work experience as well. It's not essential for most courses, but if you have that, you can talk about it as well. And I'll go into a bit more detail about this later, but it doesn't have to be related to your course. It's the skills that come from it. So, maybe you're doing something like you're maybe working as a waitress in a hotel or something like that. And obviously it's completely unrelated to the course that you're applying for, perhaps, but there's still a skill set that comes from that. So time management, commitment, teamwork, you can talk about all those things, and that's really relevant. You can also talk about things like volunteering. Particularly at Birmingham, we're very keen to know a lot about the volunteering that you've done, because it's something that we do a lot of at the university, so you can continue with that when you join us. And you can also talk about clubs and societies that you're part of. That could be within school or outside of school. And also skills related activities, so things that you may have done that could come from the clubs and societies, or other things that you've taken on. Sports is also important as well. So Birmingham in particular is quite a sports intensive university, and it doesn't have to be that you're coming to study a sports related subject, but we want to know about what the skill sets come from that. You can also talk about your hobbies as well, and that's something else we would definitely consider. So what we're really looking for is those three things at the bottom. So motivation, so why do you want to study that subject? Commitment to the subject, and also enthusiasm for the subject as well. So those are three important things to come across during that personal statement. So it's important to get involved. And so any of you that are thinking about maybe applying for next year, so for 2023 entry, so think about what you can do now. Think about the things that you might be able to do, or even if you're applying for 2022 entry, because you've still got time to apply for that application cycle. Think about what you've done. Keep a note of your musical and sporting activities. Think about your work experience. If any of you are looking at maybe thinking about studying something like medicine, nursing, physiotherapy, social work, stuff like that, if you're going into a caring profession, it is quite good to get work experience in a similar field. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a medical field, but something that you can show that you've got that caring nature. Also the voluntary activities as well that we mentioned, paid work, but also balance this alongside your studies, because obviously your studies and your grades are very important. And we always say, make time for extracurricular activities, obviously make time to get some sleep and get your rest, and also have some fun as well. We're very much about work-life balance at Birmingham. We want you to have a really good time when you're studying with us, both academically and also socially as well. And that's what we want you to do before you come and join us, to become a very well-rounded student and character when you come to join us. So in terms of the facts, as I've mentioned a couple of times, you can only write one personal statement. And again, just to reiterate the length, 4,000 characters or 47 lines, whichever comes first. It will cut off past that. So you will do the application process on an online portal. And when you get to that 4,000 characters or 47 lines, it will cut off. So you won't be able to write any more than that. What we tend to recommend is when you do your personal statement is don't write it directly into the application portal. It does time out. So I think after about 30 minutes, if you're typing in there, it will time out. So you will then lose your text unless you've saved that. So don't do that. So perhaps do it in a Word document or whatever you want to use, and then copy and paste that in once you're ready. But just keep checking on those characters and the lines there as well. Okay, you should always keep a copy of your personal statement as well, especially if you're applying for a course that you might need to come for an interview. So you can remember what you've put in there, because we will perhaps pick up on certain areas that we'll ask you about. As I just talked about, all applications are processed online, and UCAS has no spelling or grammar check. So again, as I mentioned with the copy and pasting it in, make sure you do it in a separate document, which might be able to check your spelling at least and your grammar a little bit as well. There's also similarity detection software. So make sure you don't copy a personal statement that you've perhaps read online, or maybe if you're looking at your friends, and you don't copy it, because we will be able to tell. And that's something that could end up as you being rejected if it's too similar. You also can't use bold, underlining or italics as well. And just to remind you, you can apply through UCAS, not directly to university. So it's slightly different to some other colleges overseas. You do actually apply directly, through UCAS, not directly to the universities. And it is just 5 universities that you'll apply for. Okay, so back to those numbers that we saw at the start. 1,779 is the number of applications that began their personal statement with, from a very young age, I've always been. And that could be interested in science, or I've always been interested in law. I've always been hoping to pursue a career as a doctor. And that's obviously a lot of personal statement that's come across in. I'll talk a little bit about opening lines a little bit later, but think about something a bit more unusual. That's going to be, the way that you kind of inspire somebody to be interested in your application, if it's different and a bit more original. Also, 148 applicants used a Nelson Mandela quote, which was this, which is, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Which again, it's fine, but because it's in so many, it becomes a little bit cliche. Quotes are quite difficult to use in applications, so be careful with that as well. It is possible to use them, but you've just got to be very careful about how you use them. So the opening paragraph. This should be very strong and is going to be encouraging you to read on. As I talked a little bit about cliches just before, so avoid cliches such as things like business is in my blood. Or I've wanted to study law since I was born. I always find that quite funny, because obviously when you were born, very small baby, I'm not sure that's exactly what's on your mind. You probably just want to sleep and have some food. So avoid things like that, because it's not really true. And also demonstrate rather than state a passion. It's okay to say I have a passion for this subject, but you want to know why. Don't just leave it there, but elaborate a bit more on that as well. So just have a quick look here. These are the most frequent opening sentences that we've seen in personal statements. So I'm not going to read through them all, but just obviously the first one I mentioned, but I've always been interested in, I'm applying for this course because nursing is very challenging, depression and demanding, the very, very similar things that we see quite a lot. There's nothing necessarily wrong with these, but they're just the most frequent ones that we see. So you may want to think about something a little bit different. Okay, so this is a statement which we did see in one of our applicants. English has been the subject which has particularly fascinated me, and I cannot imagine studying anything else. But this student was actually applying for a joint honours course. So they were applying for English and history. They don't mention anything about history there. This course is very competitive. So the admissions tutor said, that solves the problem for me then. So this is the admissions tutor for history. I just don't want to take the student because he or she has put no comment at all about why they're interested in history. So do be aware of that if you're applying for a joint honours course, or if perhaps, as I mentioned at the start, you're applying for a couple of different courses at different universities. It's important to remember these 2 points here. So we want less of what has been done and more of what you got out of it. So we also have a lot of applications, so it's around 700,000. It's actually probably gone up a little bit from that. So especially in the last couple of years, we have seen quite a big increase in applications through UCAS from both applicants here in the UK, but all over the world as well. So do make it interesting. Some admissions tutors receive hundreds of UCAS forms. If you're applying for something like law, business, computer science, they're very, very popular courses. So they will be having hundreds of UCAS forms coming through to them, if not thousands. So what sets you apart from the rest of our other applicants? And try to avoid usual bland sentences, but be careful with what you do. These are just some examples here. Usually I ask students to sort of comment on what they think, but I'll just kind of read this out for you, and I'll just give a little bit of a breakdown of what we think of these kind of comments. So I'm currently a prefect in my school and house captain. I'm completing my Duke of Edinburgh Gold Award, and I play on the school netball team. I also play the piano. This student was applying for accounting and finance course with us at Birmingham. So there's nothing wrong with anything this student has put here, but I'm sure you can see it's very much a list. So they've just kind of listed the things that they've done, the things that they've completed, the successes that they have, and they're all really great things, but they've not explained what they've got out of those things, what skill set that's given them. They've also not related it at all to the accounting and finance program. So that's what we're kind of looking at as well. So something that you've done and how that links to the course that you want to do, or perhaps the skills that are behind that course as well. So, and a second example here, and this student was applying for English and creative writing with us. So as captain of the cricket team, I've gained good communication skills with my team, and this has helped me understand how important teamwork is for achieving success. I write for the school's monthly newsletter, which has improved my literacy and editorial skills while developing my creativity. This has given me much more confidence and has led me to express my ideas clearly. So instantly you can see how much this is a better written statement. The previous one, again, just a list, no real grammar, no real structure, whereas this one, it flows much better. And he's or she has really given a good outline of what they have got out of what they've done. So when they were captain of the cricket team, they gained good communication skills. They've also linked this in, because obviously something like communication is very important for a course in English and creative writing. They've talked about teamwork. They've talked about writing on the monthly newsletter, which has improved their literacy and editorial skills, and also about how this has helped their confidence and expressing ideas. So they've really picked out on the skills that they've got from what they have done. So as I mentioned in a previous slide, less of what you've done, but more of what you've got out of it, and try as much as you can to link it to your course. And this, you might not instantly think being captain of the cricket team links with English and creative writing, and it doesn't, obviously, but obviously the skill set behind it does link a little bit better. So don't go over the top either. There's something, this is quite a funny one here. So when I'm not working towards world peace, I enjoy learning languages from scratch, writing symphonies and playing a standard of golf that Tiger Woods could only dream about. This is not a real one, to be honest, but it's just very, very funny that some students do go in this kind of thing. This is an opportunity to really sell yourself and blow your own trumpet a little bit, if you know that saying, but you need to make sure you're not going over the top, and it's realistic, you know, what you're doing. And we will ask you about these things if you come to interview, and sometimes even if you don't, you know, we may end up talking to you about it in when we invite you to visit days or on campus, online visit days and campus events and stuff like that. So identify key skills. So I'm just going to give one example here, which is medicine, which I know a lot of students in Canada are quite interested in. So the best thing to do is whatever subject, whether it be medicine, engineering, law, whatever it is, sit down and have a think about the skill set that you need to do that course. So for example, here, there's a list, of all the different skills that we think or we've decided that are quite essential for you to do medicine. So obviously academic background, but aside from that, you've got the physical stamina, dexterity, desire to help people, ability to work under pressure, time management, methodical, etc., etc. And then what you need to do next is think about how you can show these, not necessarily all of them, but how you can show these from what you've done, either within your academic study, extracurricular activities, volunteering, work experience. So have a look at that and how you can tie it in. I'm aware we don't have a huge amount of time and I want to leave you some time for questions, but I'll just give you an example here. So this is a medicine application. And what they've done is they have looked at those skill set and put in there various things to show that they can be a good candidate for medicine. So, for example, they've put in there that they volunteered to raise money, which gave them an opportunity to adapt to hectic situations. Obviously, something that's very important for working in the medical field. They can also deliver to large crowd and cooperate with people. They also talk about communication skills, how to deal with people of all backgrounds and ages, opportunity to reason with them. They talk about as being a prefect, that they took on responsibility, and they got things like teamwork and perseverance. So they have really looked at what you need to be a doctor and put that into this application. And quickly looking at this, you can see that a lot of that, if anything, is actually really related to medical field. So you're volunteering, they've talking about being a prefect. So a lot of it's not related to the medical field at all, but the skill set that they've got from what they've done is very, very relevant. So that's what you'll need to do when you decide what subject you want to apply to, is have a look at the skill set that's required and think about things that you've done and include those. Just a really bad personal statement, and this one was for English language and literature. They opened with a quote, which, as I said, is always a little bit difficult, and we always say to be careful about that. There is also very, very bad grammar here, and which is terrible for someone applying for English language. There's no punctuation, there's no spaces, and there's different spelling mistakes, thrist instead of thirst. There's all that cliche of love of reading from a young age. They also have a bit of a at the bottom, they put sort of a joke in there as well, which is very, very difficult to put in. We tend to recommend avoiding that unless you're really confident that it works. So this is kind of an example of a bad personal statement, and the things that we do see coming through. Some students don't put the effort in, they perhaps leave it too late. So do make sure that you take time to prepare for this, because it is a really important part of the application process at UK universities. So some things that we would suggest that you should do is create a list of ideas before you start, produce several drafts, ask people for feedback. So your friends, your family, your teachers, they may think of things that you don't remember, or you've perhaps thought that that wasn't relevant, but then they might be able to remind you. Do some research into the courses and the universities that you're applying to, and really do look at your punctuation, grammar and spelling. We're lucky today, I actually hand wrote my personal statement for my UCAS form, showing my age now, back in 2003, so a long time ago. So obviously I had to take a lot more time to do mine and make sure my grammar and punctuation was good, and really scary actually putting pen to paper when I actually wrote it down for the final time. But we're luckier today, you're going to be doing that on a computer, so you can spend some time doing that on a separate document. So a lot of your grammar and spelling will get checked anyway by the software that you'll be using. Obviously, demonstrate your motivation for studying the subject. understanding of the subject, as we sort of touched on before. Just make sure you show that you have done some research and you know what the subject you're coming to study is about. Showcase your relevant skills and knowledge, and also highlight your originality. And the don't. So don't use words you don't understand. Sometimes students will maybe want to put something different and they'll go to the thesaurus and find another word, but they don't really understand it and it might not quite work in the right way. So don't use words you don't understand, because otherwise it might affect the flow of the actual personal statement. Don't talk about irrelevant things. You know, we want everything to be relevant to the application process and the course that you're applying to, but don't obviously overlook anything either. So make sure you pick out the points that you want. And don't lie. I know that sounds obvious, but sometimes students do elaborate on certain things, or maybe even just make things up, and you may be questioned about that at interview. And don't leave it too late either, because you, like I say, you'll end up rushing it. It won't be as good as you want, and it could be the thing that will let you down, and maybe you won't get a place over another student. And obviously, as I mentioned before, do not copy or download a personal statement, because we do have plagiarism software. And there's a little bit of information here about that. So UCAS similarity detection, this came up in 233 applications, which was ever since I accidentally burnt holes in my pajamas after experimenting with my chemistry set on my 8th birthday. I've always had a passion for science. So there's a lot of people, 233 people were experimenting with a chemistry set on their 8th birthday, which could be possible, but very unlikely. So this obviously gets detected. The UCAS will alert the university, and then we can decide whether we want to proceed with considering your application. So do make sure it's original. By all means, have a look at other personal statements to get an idea, but it is important for you to do something that's original and it's completely your own work. Okay, so in summary, make sure you research both the courses and the universities that interest you. Ideally, you can visit. Obviously, it's very difficult at the moment with the current pandemic situation. Obviously, hope things are settling down a little bit, fingers crossed. So there might be opportunity. We did have our open day on campus last weekend, so last Saturday. We had an on-campus open day, which was great. But we do a lot of online events as well, so keep coming to those. You can speak to people like me, but we also have events with our students as well, so you can speak to them. So try and make the most. Obviously today we're quite lucky that we have so many online tools that you can use, like events like this, or other things like we've got virtual campus tours and lots of videos and stuff like that. Also be realistic in terms of both your skill set. So have a look at your skill set. Is it relevant for the course you're going to go on to? And also your academic achievement as well. So are your grades suitable for the university you're thinking about applying for? Discuss your choices with your teachers and your family, you know, see what they think. Some of you may end up doing sort of aptitude tests to see which subject areas might be best for you. And, you know, think about really what you want to study. You know, it's got to be something that interests you. You're going to be studying that course for 3 or 4 years. You know, if you're doing something like medicine or dentistry, you're going to be taking it for a very long time, for 5 years potentially. So you really want to know that you're interested in that subject area. Spend time on your personal statement, and also make sure you get someone else to read it each time. And the one thing a really good bit of advice is to not write something too long and try and cut it down, because you'll get very attached to what you've written, and it'll be difficult to cut it out. So start small and build it up. That's the best way to do it, because otherwise you're going to be finding it difficult to cut things out, and it will also affect the structure and the flow of it. So maybe start small and build up. Do some maps, you know, mind maps, you know, write down ideas and then pick out what you think is most relevant for your application. And keep calm. You know, it is important part of the application process, but don't worry too much about it. You know, there's a lot of other things we look at as well. Obviously, your application, your grades, your reference. So just keep calm, but take some time to make sure that you spend enough time on this as well. Okay, so some top tips: make sure it's a personal statement. Sounds obvious, but you know, as I mentioned before, don't copy from other people or something that you've seen online. Create a mind map, as I just mentioned, and produce several drafts and keep copies. Check your punctuation, grammar and spelling, and finally avoid text, speak and emojis, and avoid that in emails as well. So some of you may end up having, after you've applied to the university, having email correspondence with admissions tutors at the university, and try and keep those relatively formal. We don't need it too formal, but at the end of the day, they are academic members of staff, and they are going to be processing your application. So try and keep those as formal as you can as well. And a little word of advice as well, depending on what your email addresses are, make sure you get something professional before you apply to universities, because that's what we will be using to keep in touch with you. So if you've just got something like Fluffy Rabbit 1982 at blah blah blah, make sure you change that. Perhaps just put your name. That's something that I really recommend, and I did that. I've got my personal email address is CaseyFriend18, which is obviously what I set up when I was 18 when I went to university, and that's still my email address today, but something professional, so we can use that as well. Okay, so that's it in terms of the presentation. So I think we've got around 10 minutes for some questions. So thank you for joining today. It's been lovely to have some of you listen to the presentation. So thank you very much.
Katie, as host, I'll jump in and maybe ask some of the questions. But first I'll say what a great presentation. I did my MBA admissions application, and I wish I'd seen this before I did it. But I ended up going to the London Business School in your neighborhood. But it was a very it's not a grueling, but it's a long process, and having like easier. So excellent. I've got one question here, and it sounds like it's from a Venezuelan student. They're wondering about programs and applying from Venezuela.
Okay, yeah, sure. So we do obviously accept applications from any country overseas. I wouldn't exactly know the entry requirements for Venezuela, but I could certainly check that out for you. Before we go, I will pop my email address in the chat box here, so you can send me an email if you include your qualification, and then I can check exactly what we ask for, whether that be a direct entry. Sometimes we need something called a foundation year for some students, so I can let you know which option might be available for you. But we certainly welcome applications from any countries overseas.
Great, and I've put the website in the chat so they can see that there as well. Okay, a limit of 5 courses for postgrad programs as well.
No, so postgrad is very different. So postgrad applications, you can actually apply as many as you want in the UK. We wouldn't recommend applying to too many because it will kind of become more difficult for you to choose. But it's different application for postgrad. So this was more sort of for UG is undergraduate is 5. But if you're coming for postgrad, you will usually apply directly to the university as well. There are some universities that use UCAS for postgrad. Birmingham doesn't. So if you applied to us for a postgrad course, you will apply directly to our website. And you can apply to as many universities, but we would recommend probably sticking with about 3 to 4, and I again would say about 5 maximum. Some universities will have an application fee as well for postgraduate applications, so that's something to bear in mind. So if you apply to loads, you will be paying several application fees, so that's something to think about as well. It's different as well in terms of how we make the decisions on that. So we're looking at your personal statement, and we're also looking at your undergraduate qualification as well. So that's also a big part of that. And you will sort of draw on your experience from your undergraduate study as well as why you want to study the course at postgraduate level. But very similar to what I talked about in the presentation about subject area, knowing that subject area. Again, at postgraduate level, you might be going to something different. We've got some conversion courses that students go to, so you might want to think about doing some research into what the subject area actually is.
Okay. Excellent. Is there a portal for international students to apply to multiple UK universities at the same time? I think UCAS is the portal, isn't it?
Yeah, so UCAS is the portal. So it stands for the University and Colleges Admission Service. So it's just a UK-based portal. They've got a website as well. You can go to that. I'll again post that for you. And then that was where you will submit your application, and they will send it out to 5 universities. We will then receive the application and process it, and then send our decision back to UCAS, who will then communicate that to you. We will also have your details as well, so we may communicate with you directly. But on the UCAS portal, there's also like a UCAS app and stuff like that as well, and that will tell you when you've got your offer, what your offer is, what grades we're asking you for, and then you will come back after you've got all your decisions from those 5 universities. You will then decide what you want to put as your firm choice, which is your university you really want to go to. And then you also have something called an insurance choice, which is a backup university. So somewhere you still wouldn't mind going to, but it's a second choice if you perhaps don't get the grades for your first university.
Excellent. Okay, good. And I put a link in the chat, so whoever's interested can click on that. Should we cover what we want to study abroad in our personal statement? And I think the answer is yes, right?
Yes. Yeah. So do talk about the subject. I would say a big proportion of the personal statement, about 70%, if not 80%, should be about why you want to study that subject, your understanding of what the subject is, skill set, so linking your skill set in with that subject area. So it is a big focus on that, and that's why I kind of touched on towards the start of the presentation about why you should choose the same subject at all those 5 universities, because it goes to all, the same one goes to all of them, and it's only going to be about one subject area. There can be slight differences. So at some universities, for example, we might have accounting and finance. At another university, it might be called business accounting or something like that. That's okay, because there's always going to be slight differences in name, but just make sure you generally talk about why you're interested in the subject area. But don't apply for something like history, psychology, business, maths, because you're never going to be able to write enough information about each of those. It also shows lack of commitment to a particular subject area, which is something that the admissions tutors don't really want to see.
Right. Okay. Does the personal statement apply when applying for a master's or postgraduate program?
Yes, it does. So you still have to write a personal statement, or statement of purpose, sometimes it's called, or motivation letter. All universities call it something slightly different at postgraduate level. It's more free text, so it's because you apply to the university directly, you will upload a personal statement, and you don't have to have that limit that UCAS imposes. So you can write as sort of much as you want, but again, we would keep it focused. So we tend to say probably no more than a page of like A4 or just over. Again, just to show your interest in the subject area and talk about your background, your skill set, any work experience you might have that's relevant. So that is, again, an important part of the application process at postgraduate level as well.
Okay. Can you be accepted to more than one uni? Can you be accepted to all 5?
Yeah. So when you apply to those 5 universities, you can get anywhere between 0 to 5 offers. Obviously, 0 is not very common. Obviously, if you're applying to a very, very competitive course, it can happen, but it's very uncommon. So most students will get some. Most students get all 5, to be honest, especially if they make realistic choices when they apply. So if you're applying to somewhere that's got the right grade, so if you're predicted, I'll talk in A levels. I know not many of you are doing A levels, just for ease. So if you're predicted AB at A level, you want to apply to universities that are probably looking for no more than AAA, and you might want to put some universities that are also looking for ABB, so somewhere above and somewhere below, and obviously universities that are looking for exactly the same grades that you're looking for. You can check out what grades we're looking for on our websites. If they're not there, you can contact us individually, if you're doing something that we don't list. But yeah, essentially you can be accepted anywhere between 0 up to 5 universities, and then you have the choice of where you want to go out of that. So you can choose one firm choice and one insurance choice. So two of those, and then the rest of them you would have to turn down.
Okay. Should we cover why we're choosing to study abroad?
Yes, that's up to you. It's not essential to mention that, but I personally quite like to see that in the application, in the personal statement, why you're thinking about coming to the UK to study. Don't put it in at the detriment of other stuff that might be relevant, but it is an important part. You know, it's a big decision. It's a big thing. Why have you chosen the UK to come to study? And that's another reason why it's quite good to do your research. So you might find something, you know, are we particularly good at your subject area because we discovered something in that area? You know, is that something that UK did years and years ago? So have a think about that as well. So that's also something to mention. And you can talk about what you're looking to get out of your experience in the UK. Is it because of the academic study? Is it because of the social experience or the cultural experience? And all of those things are really good for us to hear. So I would certainly touch on it. But, you know, as I mentioned, it's quite short. So do that sort of mind map. Write that down as one of the things that you might want to mention and just see if you can fit it in, but maybe not at the detriment of something that's relevant for the course.
Okay. Sometimes it's harder to write succinctly, isn't it, than it is? So you have to be, for pre-registration master's programs, professions like physio, occupational therapy, would it be possible to get prior learning assessed and some courses be waived or given credits for?
It can be possible, but it's not very common in the UK. It depends on the university. At Birmingham, to be honest, it's not that common for us to waive credits. There are certain courses that we do have possibility. It tends to be more our engineering courses, if I'm honest. We don't really have it for things like physio, because one of the reasons is because if you did want to practice in the UK afterwards, there's a certain amount of hours of patient contact time that you need to do. So that has to be covered. So if you ended up sort of missing, skipping credits, you wouldn't be able to get enough hours in to be able to then practice afterwards. It is possible in some universities. So it's a bit of work for you, but you might have to contact them individually and check if that's a possibility. They may ask for you to send your transcripts and stuff like that of prior learning, so we can have a look at that and see if there's anything that you could be exempted from.
Okay, great. I think that's it. And I know, Katie, it's close to 11 o'clock your time. So
yes, it is.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem at all.
If anyone does have a question or any further sort of information, you can fill out the info request form at the University of Birmingham's booth. And I'm sure Katie will get back to you. Thank you very much.
I will do.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of the weekend. And that's it. That's a wrap.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks very much. See you soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.